So, new election date, October 17, of course, first Saturday post the school holds. The Prime Minister is with us. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Did you consider October 3 seriously beyond the I couldn't get the halls rebooked? In other words, were you honestly going to go for an election in the school holidays?
Yes. No, I think when weighing up against all of the other considerations, previously, we consider public holidays, regional holidays, school holidays. Under these circumstances, my view was, if that's the only thing that's standing in the way,
Wow.
then actually under these circumstances we should put that aside. But actually the issue was, Mike, that the Electoral Commission just said it couldn't be done. So the earliest they could do it was in 4 weeks. I know it's not ideal. We will have early voting still in the school holidays. But given the circumstances, I think that's just something we have to accept.
Now, Australia is having international students back as of next month. Why aren't we?
Well, obviously at the moment our focus is dealing with the outbreak that we have in Auckland. We've said previously, Mike, you might recall, that we haven't ruled out a system in the future where we manage potentially international students, even if they are in separate bespoke quarantine facilities. We have said, though, that our focus should be on doing that in the new academic year rather than this one, given the work that would need to go into doing that.
But why is all the work? Why is it so much more difficult here when the Australians can do it? And surely in a $5 billion industry, you'd be champing at the bit to get them back.
The suggestion I saw was that they were talking about quite a small number, in the hundreds, if my memory.
Yeah, but that's how you start.
Oh, sure. And we're saying that that's something that we would look to in the new year. It's not something we believe that we should be at this point in time.
That's what I'm asking. Why not?
On trying to get New Zealanders home. Because actually most of our demand is still going to making sure our system is right for those New Zealanders.
So they've got a better system than we have?
No, not necessarily. I would want to get into the details of what it is they're doing, whether they're doing it with their operators, because that's what's being asked for in New Zealand. I think if you said to our institutions at the moment a number like 300, what they're looking for are thousands. And so that's a much bigger proposition. But
I'm just interested in a government that's being proactive and can start bringing in revenue to the country that's so desperately needed, and the Australians seem to be, and we're not. On
quite a small scale.
Yeah, but that's how you start.
And I will happily look at the way they've designed it and the way that they're doing it. I'm quick to look at what we can learn from others in order to see whether or not it is worthy of being replicated. They at the moment are looking at, I think, from just a few areas as well, and it's into Adelaide, as I understand. So they've got Hong Kong, China, Japan, I think they're looking to, and with just 300. But with that, let's look at what they've done and how they're doing it.
Good. Does elective surgery really need to be cancelled because of level 3? Yeah,
I've asked the same question just yesterday. That was my concern too. One of the rationales I heard, Mike, being repeated, which I don't know is necessarily the actual reason for health on the ground, was the concern around preserving capacity within the system. When I probed that, the actual reason is that just some of the staff that are used for planned care, so electives, are being redeployed to support our work and response around the current outbreak in Auckland. That's not to say that there shouldn't be the ability to have some electives still underway.
Exactly.
So yesterday the Director General undertook that he would go back to the DHB and talk to them about that, because my understanding is that there is a bit of a desire within the system to still keep as many of those electives going as possible.
All right. This testing shambles you've wandered into, how is it that when you were expecting so many tests at various places, including ports and quarantines and borders and stuff, when the numbers weren't coming in other words, thousands and thousands of tests that allegedly were being done and they weren't coming in, why is it that nobody goes, where are the tests?
Well, one of the issues, and this is exactly what we're going through at the moment, one of the issues is that early on they were running a system where people who were working at our borders weren't necessarily getting tested at the border. So matching in amongst thousands of tests, when one of those tests happened to be border workers, was one of the problems early on in the system. So what started happening then, Mike, was that we started from the 10th of July, from memory, we started setting up mobile testing stations at the airport. And now the issue still is there that whilst those testing stations were set up in July, and we had one on the 10th of July and we had another one on the 16th of July, we still had a view that asymptomatic people should be being tested, and what it appears is that that was not as wide as the testing was going. So
but
some
why?
of this we are still, and look, ultimately I'd need to ask public health officials on the ground, but
Well,
that
haven't you
was
asked them
certainly
that
our
already?
expectation. Oh yes, you can imagine the conversations that
And what
we're
do they
having
say?
at the moment, Mike.
I mean, are they just ignoring you? It's one of two problems.
No.
Either you guys are asleep at the wheel, or the people you instruct are asleep at the wheel, one or the other.
No, you can see what our expectations were, and they're very clear, that there would be regular routine testing of both symptomatic and asymptomatic people working at our high-risk phases. That
Well, where's
borders,
Bloomfield then?
that
Why
included
isn't he all over them like a rash?
The one thing, Mike, I do just want to make sure that we don't set up a false sense that somehow that equally is the answer to everything. There's no suggestion from anyone, not from us or from health, that you would have, for instance, a daily regime. And yet that's the only thing that would pick something up on a regular basis.
But it's got to be better than it was, which was non-existent.
That's not entirely true. It was.
See, David Skegg, who I've got a lot of time
nearly as
for,
widespread as it
David
needed to
Skegg,
be.
when he heard your original plan, which was to do it every 2 or 3 weeks, he said that's simply not good enough, and you weren't even doing 2 or 3 weeks at that point.
Well, in our MIQ, we did have testing regularly going through. Cabinet then were of the view that we needed to make sure that we had, within the jet park in particular, much more regular, that it needed to be across every single worker. And so that was a reflection of the fact that we were hearing, for instance, in some cases, reluctance from workers to be tested that regularly. Our view was that that should not be a choice and it had to be done.
No, but you only changed that view once level 3 came along. See, and you said July a moment ago, August 3.
No, that's not true. The 20th of July, Cabinet said that we wanted everyone who was working in MIQ to be tested.
Yeah, but they weren't. August 3, Hipkins said we do have a testing program in place for all of those people. Bloomfield backed him up. He said workers are all part of a surveillance testing program. Yep. Simply wasn't true.
Yes, and not to the extent that we wanted. No, that's correct, Mike.
But why?
But again...
See, here's your problem. Here's your problem. Here's your problem with your elimination.
Mike, would you like me to answer the question?
All right, sorry. The question is why?
Yes. Well, we did have the testing set up. Not everyone who was asymptomatic was going through it. It appears that in some cases, staff were reluctant to be testing, and we needed to compel them. Of course, we've done that now. It is in an order. Everyone has to be.
Yeah, but that's retrospective.
These are issues we are going back through, as you would expect us. But
Sure.
I would still say this, Mike. Even a David Skegg's regime that has a weekly system could have someone that was tested on a Monday, someone who touches something that may particularly be infected on a Wednesday.
But the more you test,
be sick by a Friday.
Of course,
and
but the
still
more
be
you
passing it on
test,
over the next 3 days.
you test, the more you know, the more confident you are. But here's your problem with your elimination strategy.
But I will also add, Mike, this. It was never the only thing we did. Daily health checks, PPE use, and testing were all part of the regime. And so if you were able to ever see what happens in our quarantines, for instance, we've even started using machines that use hydrogen peroxide vapors to make sure that we are decontaminating spaces that we've had COVID patients through. It is
brilliant.
Really rigorous regime.
The reason I'm asking the question is that you're relying on an elimination and the border is leaked. And you can't bring a knife to a gunfight. You don't have the tools for elimination, as we've just seen, and everything seems to be retrospective as you panic when it's revealed that what you thought was going on wasn't going on.
Well, I would certainly not describe the methodical way that we are working through this in the way you have.
Yeah, but you're working through it retrospectively.
Mike, what is your counterfactual to the system of making
sure
that when we see cases, we squash them? Because if your suggestion is that the strategy of stamping out cases is to simply coexist with them, then that is Victoria.
No. What I'm saying is run the border properly in the first place so you don't have to go back to level 3. I mean, it seems clear to me that you're going back to level 2 or level 3 on an ongoing basis. That's your strategy, isn't it? No. As
we've already pointed out, for instance, we have cases in the Waikato and we've not moved the Waikato to level 2. This is simply the case where we have a cluster where, of course, we're still working through where that index case is. And so it did present to us differently than if we had a scenario where we could just...
Just to correct, you have moved the Waikato to level 2.
No, so to level 3 restrictions.
Right. Okay, got you. But this is it. It's elimination, and when elimination fails, we try and squat. This is it for the foreseeable, isn't it?
No, stamping out policy means that you use contact tracing, quarantine and isolation as a strategy when cases emerge. And you hear people talking about how difficult it will be, no matter what we do, Mike, no matter what we do. And that's why, for instance, no country in the world has managed to keep COVID outside their borders once they've had it. And in fact, of all countries in the world, we're the one that went the longest. So I think that's a demonstration just of how difficult this is. But also, I do think it's also a demonstration, given even with the restrictions we have now, we are still operating more freely than most, that ultimately an elimination strategy, as tough as it is, ultimately offers us the greatest freedoms too.
All right, appreciate your time. Jacinda Ardern.